My wife cheated with our accountant, stole $250, $0 from the family estate, then secretly married him, and now she's claiming half of our $1.2 million house in a bitter legal battle. I didn't even see it coming. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never imagined that the woman I loved and trusted would turn out to be the biggest liar and cheat I'd ever come across. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about her. Sarah was the kind of wife who always seemed to have it all together, the perfect picture of a successful, polished woman. We had been married for 10 years, and until recently, I believed we were solid. But then little cracks started to show, things like her spending more time away from home late nights, and her becoming strangely defensive whenever I asked questions about her day. It all started about 3 months ago when I noticed her acting distant, more irritable and secretive. She'd brush off my concerns, say I was overthinking everything, or accuse me of being paranoid, but I could tell something was off. She'd get defensive when I tried to look at her phone or ask about her whereabouts. I wasn't the jealous type, but her behavior was enough to make me suspicious. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was stressed at work or dealing with something personal. Then, one night, I decided to do some digging. It wasn't something I took lightly. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops around, but something felt wrong. I got into her emails, her phone, her social media. What I found was shocking. A series of messages between her and our accountant, Mark, an older guy, well respected in our town and someone I had trusted to handle our finances. The messages weren't just about business. They were filled with flirtation, suggestive remarks, and plans to meet up outside of work. I remember reading one message where she called him my secret escape and told him she was tired of pretending everything was perfect at home. The real kicker was the financial documents I found tucked away on her laptop. Over the past 6 months, she had transferred over $250, $0 from our joint account into personal accounts, accounts I never knew about. She'd been secretly siphoning money, and the worst part was she'd lied to me about everything. She claimed she was investing in our future, saving for a big trip or paying off some debt. But it was all a lie. The money was gone, and she was planning to marry Mark. She'd even bought a ring. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind was spinning, my stomach sank, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling numb. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? I felt betrayed, angry, and utterly humiliated. I never thought she was capable of such deception. She'd always been the one to call me out for being too trusting, but now I saw how she had used that trust against me. I was furious, but more than that, I was devastated. All those years, all those promises, and it was all a lie. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready to face her face to face just yet. I needed to gather my thoughts, figure out my next move. That night I sat alone in the dark, trying to process everything. I kept thinking about the money, the lies, the secret marriage, how she had managed to keep it hidden for so long. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I realized that my wife, the woman I loved, had been cheating on me with Mark, stealing from us, and planning a new life with him behind my back. It was a betrayal so deep I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. But I also knew I couldn't let this slide. I had to act, had to find out just how far she'd gone and decide what to do next. The shock was still fresh, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change forever. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind kept replaying everything I'd uncovered the night before, her secret accounts, the flirtatious messages with Mark, the stolen money. I could still see her face when I confronted her, the way she lied so easily, like she was convincing herself more than me. But I knew I couldn't keep quiet. I had to get to the bottom of it fast. I decided I couldn't confront her directly just yet. Instead, I started digging into her phone records, bank statements, and emails more thoroughly. I wanted to understand the full scope of her betrayal. That's when I found something even more startling, a series of emails between her and Mark discussing their wedding plans. She'd already secretly married him. She'd gone through with it, hidden it from me completely. I couldn't believe it. Our entire marriage, all those years, and she was living a double life with him. I felt like I'd been punched again, this time with the realization that she'd been planning to leave me for months, maybe longer. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the screen, feeling a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me, steal our money, and then marry the guy behind my back? I felt so betrayed, so humiliated. All those nights I'd stayed up worrying about her, wondering if she was cheating, and now I knew I was right. But what hit me hardest was the financial betrayal. She'd taken $250,000 from us, and I had no idea how she planned to explain that to the bank or to our family. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just storm into her office or her house without knowing what I was doing. I had to be strategic. I started by calling a lawyer I knew, someone who specialized in family law and financial disputes. I wanted to understand my options, especially since she was claiming half of our house, which was worth over $1 million. I also wanted to get a sense of how to handle the financial mess she'd created. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on her schedule, watching her come and go, trying to catch her in the act of doing something suspicious. I even hired a private investigator just to verify her whereabouts and her meetings with Mark. It was strange seeing her pretend she was innocent, acting like everything was fine, but I knew better. I'd seen the messages, the emails, the bank transfers. She was planning her escape, and she was doing it well. Then one day she came home early from work. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to be relaxed, but I was ready. She walked in, her face tight, trying to act like nothing was wrong. I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her about her relationship with Mark. She immediately started lying, saying they were just friends, that I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. She told me she'd never cheated, never stolen from me, and that all the money was a misunderstanding. But I wasn't buying it. I could see right through her. Her face was a mask, but her eyes told the truth. She was guilty as hell. The confrontation got heated fast. I told her I knew she married Mark and that she'd stolen more than $250 from us. Her response was classic Sarah. She started crying, calling me crazy, saying I was accusing her of things she never did. She spun this elaborate story about how she was under pressure at work, how Mark was just a shoulder to lean on, and how she loved me but was just feeling trapped. She insisted she was innocent, that everything was a mistake, and that I was overreacting because I was jealous or insecure, but I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I could see the manipulation, the desperation to keep her secrets hidden. That moment was a turning point. I felt a surge of anger, pure, burning anger, but underneath it there was also a deep sadness. I loved her once, or at least I thought I did. Now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who had used me and betrayed everything we'd built. I realized that I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I was done being the naive husband who trusted blindly. I had to face the reality that my marriage was over, and I had to decide what came next. I couldn't let her keep lying and stealing. I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. After that confrontation, everything changed. I knew I couldn't just sit back and pretend it was all a misunderstanding. I had to take action. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I could, screenshots of the emails, bank statements, her texts, everything. I wanted to be ready for whatever was coming, especially since I knew she'd spin her stories and deny everything. The last thing I needed was her twisting the truth to make herself look innocent. I also contacted the lawyer I'd spoken to earlier. We set up a meeting to discuss the legal options. The lawyer made it clear that I had a strong case for divorce, especially considering her infidelity, financial theft, and secret marriage. She was claiming half of the house, but I had proof of the stolen money, and I knew I could fight her for full custody of the property and our assets. The lawyer warned me that she might try to drag things out, maybe even claim she was entitled to a share of the house because she was co-owner through her contributions, whatever that meant. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Meanwhile, I started planning my next moves. I called a financial advisor to help me figure out how to freeze her accounts and protect what was left. I also contacted a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to do anything drastic. I wasn't naive. I knew she was capable of anything to save herself or to manipulate the situation. I had to be prepared for her to lie, deny, or even try to take everything she could. One thing I didn't expect was how quickly her attitude changed. After the initial confrontation, she started acting even more bitchy, snapping at me over small things, trying to guilt-trip me into backing off. She'd say I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was ruining her life. But I knew better. I saw through her game. She was desperately trying to keep her lies intact, to convince herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. But the evidence was clear, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. One night she sat me down and said she wanted to talk like adults. That's when she started spinning her lies about how she was under so much pressure, how Mark was just a friend, how she never meant to hurt me, and that she loved me but needed space to figure things out. She told me she was sorry for the money issues but insisted she was innocent of any affair, of secretly marrying Mark or stealing from us. Honestly, I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. Her words felt hollow, rehearsed, like she was just trying to buy time or soften the blow. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the panic behind her fake tears. That night I lay awake, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I kept thinking about all the years we'd spent together, how she'd lied and manipulated her way into my life, how she'd stolen from us, and then married the guy she'd been cheating on me with. I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her true nature. The truth was, I was devastated. I'd been blindsided by her betrayal, and now I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The next day, I made the decision to file for divorce. I knew it was the right thing to do, not just for myself, but to stop her from taking any more of what was ours. I also told her that I was going to fight for full custody of the house and the money she'd stolen. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after what she'd done. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, but I also knew I had to stay calm, focus on the facts, and let the law do its job. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. I didn't want her to win, not after all the lies and deceit. I had to reclaim what was mine, and I was ready to fight for it. The legal process moved quickly once I filed for divorce. I had all the evidence laid out, her emails to Mark, the bank transfers, the proof of her secret marriage, and I made sure my lawyer knew everything. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while, and I wanted to make sure I fought hard to keep what was rightfully mine. The house, the savings, the property. She wasn't getting a dime of it without a fight. I also had to consider the emotional toll, but I pushed that aside, focusing on the facts and protecting myself. In the meantime, Sarah's attitude became even more hostile. She started accusing me of trying to ruin her, of being jealous, of trying to control her. She told mutual friends I was controlling and paranoid, trying to paint herself as the victim. But everyone who knew us well knew she was the one who'd betrayed me, stealing, cheating, and lying. I didn't bother to clear her name anymore. I just kept my head down and prepared for the inevitable court battle. One afternoon, she called me crying, really crying, the kind of crocodile tears she'd used before. She said she was sorry and begged me to reconsider, claiming she still loved me and that she'd stop seeing Mark if I just gave her another chance. She said she was overwhelmed, that she'd made mistakes, and that she didn't want to lose everything. It was classic manipulation, and I knew better. I told her I wasn't interested in her apologies. I wanted what was fair and what she'd stolen from us. I told her I'd see her in court and that I'd fight for every penny. The court date was set for a few weeks later. I remember feeling anxious but also relieved that I was finally taking control. I knew she'd try to drag things out, maybe even accuse me of abuse or manipulate the judge with her tears. But I had all the proof, and I was ready. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace the stolen money and to help me build a solid case. The more I dug into her financial lies, the more it became clear she'd been planning this for months. She drained our account, married Mark secretly, and set herself up for a new life, all while pretending to be the devoted wife. During this time, I also contacted the bank to freeze her accounts. I wanted to prevent her from doing anything else to harm our finances. The bank was cooperative once they saw the evidence of her unauthorized transfers. I also started looking into legal ways to claim the house outright, especially since I had proof she'd been stealing from us and living a double life. It was frustrating knowing she was trying to claim half of our estate, especially since she contributed nothing but lies and theft. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. Sitting there, facing her across the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of anger and resolve. She looked confident, even smug, trying to act like she was the victim. But I knew better. I presented my case with everything I had: her emails, bank statements, proof of her secret marriage, and the evidence of theft. I saw her lawyer try to twist the facts, but it was useless. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I knew deep down I had a strong case. When the judge finally made the ruling, I felt a wave of relief. It was a win. She was ordered to give up her claim to the house, and the court awarded me the full amount of the stolen money plus legal fees. She was also denied custody of the house, which I had fought hard for, given how much she'd betrayed me. It was over, finally. But the emotional scars ran deep. I'd lost the woman I thought I knew, and I'd lost trust in everything I'd believed in. Still, I felt a strange sense of closure. Justice had been served, and I could finally start to move on. In the aftermath, I realized how much I'd grown through this nightmare. I learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes people hide who they really are behind a mask of charm. I also learned that revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about fighting for what's right, protecting yourself, and reclaiming your life after betrayal. I've come to understand that sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself again. And honestly, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but if it happened to you, I'd say don't back down. Fight for your peace, your money, and your dignity. Because in the end, that's all you really have: yourself. The months that followed the court victory were a whirlwind of relief, pain, and reflection. After everything, I finally had my life back. At least, that's how it felt initially. The house was mine again, and I started the slow process of rebuilding what was left of my financial stability. But beneath the surface, the scars of betrayal ran deep. I couldn't shake the feeling of being played for a fool for so many years. It was like waking up from a nightmare where everything you believed in was a lie. I moved out of the house she had claimed during the legal battle and rented a small apartment nearby. I needed space to breathe, to think. I couldn't stand the sight of her anymore, especially after the way she'd lied and manipulated her way into my life, stealing from us and then marrying Mark behind my back. The betrayal had shattered my trust in her, in our marriage, and honestly in the idea that people are inherently good. In the quiet months that followed, I took time to analyze everything I'd learned. The truth was, I was angry at her for the lies, the theft, the marriage, the manipulation. But I was also angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for being so blind to her true nature. I wondered how many other things I missed, how many signs I ignored because I wanted to believe in the best of her. That's what hurt the most, knowing I'd been duped, that I'd trusted someone who clearly had no regard for me or the life we built. I also started therapy, not just to deal with the emotional pain, but to understand why I'd been so blind. Talking to someone who was impartial helped me see that I'd been too trusting, too eager to see the good in her. But now I knew better. I learned that sometimes people are just plain selfish, will betray, steal, and lie to get what they want. And I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. The financial damage was still a raw wound. I managed to recover some of the stolen money through legal means, but I knew I'd never get all of it back. I had to accept that some of her betrayal was irreversible. That realization hurt, but it also forced me to focus on moving forward. I started working on my career more seriously, investing in myself for the first time in years. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I wanted to be the man who learned from his mistakes and moved on stronger. One of the hardest parts was facing friends and family. Some were supportive, but others couldn't believe Sarah was capable of such deception. I got a lot of well-meaning advice. Some told me to forgive, Others told me to forget and move on, but I knew I had to do what was right for me. Forgiveness wasn't on the table for her, not yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Right now, I just needed time to heal and rebuild. Despite the pain, I learned something valuable. Trust is fragile and it can be shattered in an instant. But life goes on. I realized I'd been holding onto the idea of a perfect marriage, a perfect life, and that it was time to accept reality. Sometimes people aren't who they seem. I also learned that revenge isn't about revenge at all. It's about standing up for yourself, fighting for what's right, and reclaiming your dignity. That's what I did, and that's what I plan to keep doing. I'm not perfect, and I'll carry the scars of this betrayal forever, but I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I see it as a lesson, one I hope no one else has to learn the hard way, but if they do, I hope they find the strength to fight back. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole ordeal changed me. I used to think I was invincible, that I could trust people blindly, that love meant never having to doubt. Turns out, that's a dangerous illusion. My wife's betrayal shattered that naivety into a million pieces, but in a strange way, it also made me stronger. It forced me to confront my own flaws, trusting too easily, ignoring the signs, wanting to see the good in someone who clearly had no intention of reciprocating that trust. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back or making her feel the pain she caused me. It's about reclaiming what was stolen, standing up for myself, and refusing to be a victim of her lies anymore. Getting the house, the money, and the justice in court was only part of it. The real victory was realizing I deserved better, deserved honesty, respect, and a life free of manipulation. Now, I focus on rebuilding a new life, one where I'm more cautious but also more aware. I've started dating again, not rushing into anything but learning to trust again on my own terms. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. It's a chapter I'll always carry, but it's also a lesson I'll never forget. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I'll say this: don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And when someone betrays you the way she betrayed me, don't let them win by breaking you down completely. Fight for yourself. Protect your assets. And most importantly, don't be afraid to stand up and say enough is enough. You deserve honesty and loyalty. Don't settle for less. In the end, I've learned that life is unpredictable, and sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest. But even after the worst betrayal, there's a way forward. It's not easy, but it's possible, and I'm proof of that. I've come out of this battered but stronger, wiser, and more determined to build a future where I control my happiness, not lies or betrayal. That's what truly matters.